If your houseplants just aren't looking as healthy as they did when you got them, or worse, look like they're barely still alive, this video is for you. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what to do if your houseplants start to slowly or quickly decline. Whether your plant's starting to turn yellow, dropping leaves, or just looking sad and never seeming to grow at all, I've got a solution for you that is going to get them looking as good as new. The key to turning around a dying plant is to fertilize it. But it's not as simple as just grabbing any bag of, plant food and just throwing it in there. There's a very specific fertilization routine you're going to need to do if you want to bring your plants back to looking how they did when you first got them, and eventually much better than when you first got them. But before I get to telling you what you should do, I need to tell you what you shouldn't do. Because if you use the wrong fertilizers, you could actually make it much harder for your plants to have any chance of recovering. So make sure you watch until the end if you want to save your plants. When most people hear that they should fertilize their plants, chances are they're going down to Home Depot and they're just getting whatever fertilizer they have there. And chances are it's going to be Miracle-Gro. But there's hardly anything worse that you could do for your plants than give them Miracle-Gro. All right, well, you may see a slight improvement in your plants for a short time after using Miracle-Gro. Over time, it's going to have an extremely negative effect on the soil and then eventually your plants. So while organic fertilizers are going to have the three components that any fertilizer have, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, organic fertilizers are going to have them derived from natural sources such as seaweed or fish, stuff like that. Miracle-Gro just has those pure chemicals in it in a salt form. So as you use the Miracle-Gro more and more, salts are going to start building up in the soil, which is going to eventually make it harder for the roots of your plants to be able to absorb any nutrients at all. And it's going to make the soil just kind of like compact, like a sponge. You'll be able to tell over time that it's doing a lot of harm to the soil. And so Miracle-Gro, it also doesn't contain any of the other trace minerals that are found in soil and are needed to keep a plant alive. So eventually all these trace minerals are going to get used up by the plant and then they're never going to be replaced. Furthermore, Miracle-Gro has something in it called copper sulfate, which kills bacteria and microbes that are in the soil. So while you might not normally think of soil as a living thing, in a lot of ways it really is. As you use the Miracle-Gro over time, it's going to completely kill the soil. And it's going to make it impossible for any plant to survive in that pot of soil. So while Miracle-Gro is, the most popular and widely used of these kind of non-organic synthetic fertilizers, I'm sure there are much more brands, many other brands that are very similar. So if you want to fertilize your houseplants, which you absolutely should, you definitely want to fertilize your houseplants, you're going to need to use an organic fertilizer. So I'll show you some of my favorites. Alright, so while these synthetic fertilizers like Miracle-Gro contain just the pure chemicals of the nutrients that plants need, organic fertilizers are going to contain these nutrients but derived from natural sources. So they're going to get them from things like compost, earthworm castings, bat guano, fish protein, kelp, stuff like that. Good natural sources. And these things are going to feed the soil and then your plant in a way that's going to make the soil healthier over time. But when you're using Miracle-Gro, as the natural nutrients are stripped from the soil over time, it's going to result in you needing to use more and more fertilizer over time to keep your plant alive. But organic fertilizers are actually going to result in the soil becoming healthier and richer in nutrients over time. So in theory, when you're using Miracle-Gro, you're going to need to use it always more and more and more. Organic fertilizers, you'll have to use them less over time, rely on them less over time as it builds up the soil. So, while you may have heard that Miracle-Gro is bad for the environment when used on plants outdoors, because the chemicals will run off into the aquifers and the waterways, get into lakes and rivers and stuff like that, it's bad for the environment, but it's also just not good for the plants in general. So there's definitely a reason to not use them on your houseplants either. When it comes to organic fertilizers, There are a bunch of good brands, but there are two that I think are the best and that I use the most, and that is Microlife and Fox Farm. Okay, so Microlife, they have a specific houseplant fertilizer which is called Biomatrix, and it's very rich in microbes that feed the soil. And most other organic fertilizers aren't going to have these microbes in them, at least not in such high numbers. So that's a big reason why I use the Microlife Biomatrix. And then it also just has a very high level of nitrogen, which is the nutrient that plants need to grow large. That's the nutrient that's going to encourage leaf growth, and it's going to help them to grow big as quickly as possible. So Microlife Biomatrix has a very high percentage of nitrogen. So, I like that one a lot. And if you want your plants to grow huge as quickly as possible, go with the Microlife Biomatrix. The other company that I really like is Fox Farm. And Fox Farm, when it comes to organic fertilizers, they're great. And when it comes to soil, they're great. They have a lot of really good soil. I always recommend people to use, for their houseplants, use the Fox Farm Happy Frog soil. It's it's pretty much the highest quality soil on the market, I think. So they have tremendous soils, but they also have a bunch of different liquid fertilizers that you can just add into the water when you're watering your plants, and that makes it super easy to fertilize them. Whether you want to fertilize houseplants, vegetables, flowers, anything, you can't go wrong with the Fox Farm brand. They just have a bunch of tremendous products. So the one that I use for houseplants is called Grow Big, Fox Farm Grow Big. And so while the one I talked about before, the Microlife Biomatrix, which is also very good, it has a bit of a weird smell to it, and it's also a very dark color. So it can potentially stain and even stain your pots if you have like a white pot. But the Fox Farm Grow Big is clear and it has no smell to it at all. So if you're worried about cleanliness when you're watering your plants, I'd go with the Fox Farm Grow Big. Just makes it easy. And it's one of the best fertilizers on the market. I swear by it, and it's a tremendous product. But these are fertilizers that you'd want to use regularly in some sort of fertilizing schedule for all your houseplants, and I would recommend like once a month. But you don't want to necessarily start giving them to a houseplant that's on its last legs. These are kind of general fertilizers that will, of course, keep your plant healthy, but they're going to cause the plant to put all of its energy into pushing out new growth and growing new leaves and growing big. If you have a houseplant that's dying, you don't want to put all of its energy into growing, at least not right away. You want it to first put its energy into healing itself, and then you can switch over to these kind of fertilizers once it's recovered. So to save any dying plant, there's one thing that's going to help more than anything, and that is liquid seaweed. All right, I went and got my liquid seaweed here to show you guys. That's that Microlife Super Seaweed. This is about as good as it gets when it comes to liquid seaweed. And you'll see it's got that 0.03, which when it comes to a dying plant, that's exactly what you want. Okay, so any of these organic fertilizers that I've recommended already, they're gonna have a balanced amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in them, which is gonna help the plant to stay healthy and grow quickly. But for a houseplant that is already not healthy, you don't really want to give it the nitrogen and the phosphorus. You just need the potassium, and it's okay for it to be in a very small amount. Potassium is responsible for the overall health of the plant, and more specifically, the root health. So if the roots are not healthy, they might not even be able to absorb nutrients very well to begin with. So what you need to do is to give it liquid seaweed for a while until it starts to recover. Liquid seaweed, it's going to help the roots to bounce back quickly, and then the rest of the plant will follow. So liquid seaweed, it's absorbed very easily by the plant, and it's also super beneficial to the soil. So it's going to quickly help the health of both the plant and the soil, and it's going to put the plant in the best possible position to recover quickly, which is what you want. If you have a plant that's not doing well, I'd recommend fertilizing it with just the liquid seaweed for at least 2 to 3 waterings. So while normally you wouldn't add fertilizer to the water every single time you're going to water them, in this case, that's exactly what I would do, okay? So once you get some liquid seaweed, I would say the first time watering your dying plant, give it a very strong dose. Give it even a little bit more than what the recommended amount on the bottle is, just for that first watering, okay? After a week or two, whatever watering schedule you have your plants on, then give it the normal recommended dose for the next watering. For the third watering, just give it a half strength dose of liquid seaweed. Okay, you don't want to overdo it, but you do want to still, you want to still give it some for that third watering. So by that time, hopefully your plant is starting to look a little bit better. I would be very surprised if it wasn't at that point after 2 or 3 doses of liquid seaweed. So then for the fourth watering, after starting the schedule, you're going to want to add in some of the normal fertilizers that I recommended before, but also at half strength. So if you're using the Fox Farm Grow Big, for this fourth watering, you're going to want to mix in a half strength dose of liquid seaweed again, and then also a half strength dose of the Grow Big. Okay, so by this point in the process, the plant should have recovered enough that you're going to want to kickstart the growth process again. And it should start putting out new leaves pretty soon. Give it a half strength dose of this, a half strength dose of the Grow Big or the Biomatrix, mix it together, give it that, and that would be for the fourth watering. So at this point, you can switch over to a normal fertilization schedule, which I think is best to do every other watering. Okay, so most of my houseplants I water once every 2 weeks, so that would mean I fertilize them once a month, every second watering. So what I would do is give them the normal organic fertilizer at a full strength dose once a month, and then every other month I'll give them a mixture of the regular fertilizer as well as the liquid seaweed, both at full strength, mixed together. And if you stick to this schedule, you should pretty much never find yourself in this position again, and your houseplants should be healthy and growing huge for years to come. Okay, so just stick to that schedule and you'll never have a dying plant again. And it's not that hard at all, especially with these liquid fertilizers that you just add in a little bit with the water. I think that's really the way to go. It just makes it a lot easier, and if you just do it every other watering, it's a pretty simple schedule to stick to. So there you go. That's how you revive a dying plant. That's how you have it looking as good as new and better than it was when it was new. And yeah, it's not hard and anyone can do it. So thank you very much for watching, my people. I love you guys. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back very soon. Thank you, guys.